הפעם אני נרגש במיוחד, כי האורח שלנו הוא לא אחר מאשר הפסנתרן הנפלא ארי פרהיה. שלום מאסטרו.
Shalom, Arie.
I understand that your birthday is tomorrow, the day after tomorrow.
The day after, yes. I try to forget about it.
And you came to us for your birthday.
Well, right before, yes.
Good connections with Israel.
I love Israel.
You know, I look back, Horowitz, your mentor, never visited us. On the other hand, Rubinstein was our beloved pianist.
Yes.
How about Arie Perahia?
I'm going to be here quite a lot. I have a new appointment as president of the Jerusalem Music Center, which I want to overlook, and I want to really be a part of. I don't want to be a sort of figurehead. So it will necessitate me being here, overlooking classes, doing master classes. On this particular occasion, I will also do a concert to raise money for the organization. So I plan to be here quite a bit.
And this job, you act as a successor of Isaac Stern.
Those are big shoes to fill. I don't know whether I can do it, but we're going to try to do something, I think, useful to the musical community and to raise the musical level as much as possible.
I think Isaac and Rubinstein were the best lovers of Israel among great artists.
It's wonderful. Yes, it's wonderful.
And Horowitz, your mentor, as I mentioned before, why?
I don't know. We never discussed the subject. In those days, the subject wasn't also very important like it is today. It's a hot spot today, and allegiances are important, whatever. It wasn't in those days, so it was easy that, you know, even going further, I knew Serkin for many years, Rudolf Serkin. I never knew he was Jewish.
That's very fun.
It was when he died and I read a biography of his that I realized he was the son of a chazan.
Yeah. Or maybe when you met Horowitz, he still hoped to come, or...
We never talked about it. We never talked about it.
Well, we have prepared some video for you. A surprise.
Okay.
Beautiful melody, Arie.
It's lovely. And the words bring back my childhood in a way when I hear ojos. That's the way we spoke, eyes. But the Spanish say ojos. It's the very old Spanish from actually the time of Cervantes, 1400s. And, you know, I didn't know English until I was 6. That was the language that I spoke at home because my grandmother lived with us till she was 97. And we only spoke Spanish. This kind of Spanish.
Ladino.
Ladino.
Can you say something in Ladino?
Me olvidé mucho. Bueno, yeah. I love words like ojos, naranjas, these words that don't have hijicos, little boys, hijicos, hijicas, endearments. My name was Moshiko. That's Moshon is Moshe. And the diminutive was Moshiko.
Mushon?
Moshon is
also?
Moses.
Tell me more about your family. They came from Salonika?
That's right. Both parents came from Salonika.
I must tell you something, that I met your father,
yes,
your
you
late
did.
father.
I remember.
We were sitting one next to the other on your recital in one auditorium.
Yes.
And when you played so marvelously, and I say to him, oh, he's so great. And he said to me, but you had to listen to the way he sang in his bar mitzvah.
Yeah, well, that's what.
So I'm sorry, but I disturbed you.
Yes.
So tell us more about your family.
Well, they escaped right before the war. Actually, they escaped in 1935, so they were very lucky because a lot of the Saloniklian community was wiped out. And they escaped not only for anti-Semitism, but also because my father couldn't find employment. So he went with his brothers, and they made a ladies' cloak and suit. Not tailor, but they made garments. And the business thrived up to a certain point, and then he lost his money, and he worked for the shul, for the synagogue. My father was the parnas at the synagogue.
The name Perahia,
Perahia.
Yeah, I opened the Tel Aviv telephone book, and I found
And there are a few of them? Yeah.
more than 30.
Oh my God, we have a whole family.
They're all mishpucha?
Yes, probably.
They call you?
No, not not yet.
Is it a very old, established family in Salonika?
It's Saloniki, and before that, there was, even in the Second Temple, we were rabbis. We're quoted in the Pirkei Avot, in the sayings of the fathers.
The reason for the name, Perahia?
I guess it was a biblical name. We are Kohanim, so they were, must have been in the synagogue.
So you are a Kohen?
I am.
And then the parents came to the Bronx.
Yeah, we ended up in the Bronx. I grew up within a shadow of the Yankee Stadium. I never watched one game, much to the people don't understand it. Well, but I never was interested in it.
You are not living anymore in America.
No, I lived for the last about 28, 29 years. I lived in London.
So maybe you are not so American.
Not so, maybe. I still love my country, America. I associate it as my country. But England had a terrific musical scene, especially when I first came in the early 80s, late 70s. There was Britain, Tippett, Clifford Curzon was a very good friend, Amadeus Quartet, Menuhin. There was such an active musical scene there that I couldn't resist it. I spent a lot of time there.
I've been thinking always, is it possible to be original in New York or in London? There are so many activities, so many musicians, and now we expect the young pianists or the young musicians today to be original. How can they?
Well, it's our hope that there will be another generation that is original and that cares a lot about music. I feel it can be. I feel it needs a lot of work. You know, I think that the Chinese are going to do it. I think the Chinese, if you go to China like I did in November, you go to a conservatory, there's about 6,000 six-year-old kids outside of the conservatory practicing. Their mothers want them to grow up as classical musicians. It's fantastic. Not as scientists, not as doctors, not as stockbrokers, but as classical musicians. I think this is so fantastic.
I was in October
Yeah.
for the 10th time or more, and I know that, and it's indeed incredible. But I would like to go back to, if you allow me, to Marie Perahia. So Marie Perahia was born in the Bronx,
Yeah.
spoke Ladino till
That's
the
right.
age of 6,
Yes.
and became a very original musician.
I don't know how.
In New York.
Yes, in New York.
In the Bronx.
Yes. No, I think the big city actually can only be an advantage because there's a lot of music there, there's a lot of influences, there's a lot of people. I think music to me was very personal because my father loved it so much. My father was not a musician, but he took me to the opera. And he went every Saturday night. My mother, who's still alive today, is bored by it. She doesn't see anything in classical music. She doesn't see the point of it. But my father loved it, and so he would take me. And every Sunday morning, I'd sing in mock Italian what I thought I heard the night before. And this grew and grew. And of course, I had the synagogue. I was in the choir and sang every Saturday. It was an Orthodox family.
You have a beautiful voice. When you sing for the kids in your lessons, it's incredible.
I don't know.
I
never cultivated the voice. It was never something I was that aware of, but I did a lot of singing. And I also remember singing at weddings where I would accompany on the organ, on the little portable organ that we had, and sing the Kimitzion and various songs.
Oh, I would have loved to ask you to do it here, but I wouldn't dare. We have prepared some tapes for you, except for Yoram Gaon singing the Ladino, and I would like you to watch it.
Now again, cello. Not too slow. Why? So that you have something all the way to the end, not suddenly slower. Okay, now play a little bit of it. I wasn't prepared for it. It does sound a bit aggressive. Let's try to get away from this defiant. Or you feel it very defiant?
Well, I just try to feel from this G up to the end, like one...
Up to the
end, actually.
No, the G is not, I don't think, a significant part of the voice leading. The G is what we sometimes call a cover tone. An inner voice. The voice leading really is only around D, E flat, and C.
Marie, you have never been a teacher.
No.
What a pity.
No.
What a pity.
Coming from you, that's a very great honor.
What a pity.
That's a great honor. But I don't know how to teach. You know, every day that I teach, I try to think about how best to bring in the material, what to bring in, how far one should go. It's not really my profession. I don't really know enough about it.
And maybe now discovering pedagogy, discovering piano teaching.
Yes. You're absolutely right. I'm thinking a lot of new things, how to try to coax a sound out of a student, how to make them aware of their own possibilities. What is the influence of technique? How much does technique have to do? How much should they work on technique? Because, you know, if you just work mechanically, you're working up the wrong street because you're not going to be able to play musically. But you must be able to improve your technique. So I have to figure out ways to do it. In my case, a lot of it was instinctive.
Horowitz was never a teacher, but
No.
he wanted to teach you. He picked you.
Yes, he did, from a very early age.
Yeah, how did he do it? He just heard a good boy. He heard about a good boy, and then he said, come to me.
Exactly, but he heard about me through Mr. Serkin. So Mr. Serkin had told him, you'd be interested in Perahia, and he called me at a very early age, 18.
So he called you?
He called me, yes. In fact, it's quite funny, because he called me at home when I didn't expect it at home at all. And the phone rings, and I answer it. I'm at my father's home. I'm 17 years old. And the phone rings, and he says, I'm Mr. Horowitz. And in my neighborhood, everybody was Mr. Horowitz. There was...
In the Bronx.
In the Bronx. The baker was Mr. Horowitz, and I was convinced it was the baker, because, you know, when you go into the bakery, there are lots of little cookies there, and I loved the cookies, and I overate the cookies, and I'm sure he was saying, now you've eaten too many cookies, I'm going to charge you for it, I'm going to charge your mother. And that's what I was worried about, Mr. Horowitz. And then I had the conversation going this way. I'm sorry about the cookies. And then he says, I think you're misunderstanding. I'm a friend of Mr. Serkin's, which I thought was lovely. Oh, that Mr. Horowitz. And then he says, come play for me. And I said, well, give me 2 weeks to practice. And he said a line which I'll never forget, which you as a musician could understand. He says, 2 weeks to practice? You don't need it. I'm a musician. I can tell. Which is true. You don't need to practice for Horowitz, although I didn't want to play just then for him. So I played for him, and he liked me. He wanted to work with me. But frankly, I was too frightened to work at 19 or 18 with Horowitz. I had to guarantee 2 years, so I didn't work with him at that time. And many, many years later, I did see him intermittently, but many, many years later, when I was in my late 30s, then I worked with him really intensively for about 3 years. It might have even been later, when I was 40. I worked with him for 3 or 4 years.
You know, it's quite wonderful, stunning what you are telling me, because Horowitz was the most self-centered artist in the whole world.
I didn't see that.
Yeah, because he wanted to deliver the goods. He wanted to find somebody, a victim, that...
He was the nicest person, one of the most intelligent persons I've ever met, patient, up to a point, because he didn't like to repeat things. You know, he said something once, at the most twice, and if you didn't get it, he moved on. But I found him always generous, always interested, one of the most important people in my life.
But I refer to this motivation that I feel now it's my time to pick some young person and to tell him what I know, because I want my knowledge to perpetuate.
You're absolutely 100% right. And it was a great, great honor for me. But, you know, I was there when he died. The night before, he played for me. And the morning they called me, I quickly rushed over, and he had already died on the floor. I saw him there. And so it was really the last 3 years of his life. 3.5 years.
Would I dare saying that that's about what you feel now? I watched this masterclass and I heard your demonstration for Jonathan, the Schubert, and then you played a phrase and he looked with big eyes and big ears, and you wanted to pass it to him?
I think that's such a necessary thing. Don't you feel that the knowledge we have is not just for us? It's to pass on for other people so that they understand what we've been through and what we try to understand, and they can reach it to another height, and they can reach it to a maybe bigger height. But that's why do you teach? Isn't that so that others can gain from what you've learned?
And I thought of another aspect. Actually, when you perform, you tell the audience whatever you think about this composition. Yes. But there is some leftover information that you want to tell somebody.
That's right. Absolutely right.
You practiced, and you have so many ideas, so you need to get rid of this information.
Exactly, exactly. And I want them to love music deeper. That's the most important thing for a teacher, is to instill this love. Because it's only the love that's the motor that's going to make them want to practice and work and things. If they don't have the love, there's nothing going to come out of there. It's going to be technique, and it's going to be they're doing it the right way or the wrong way, and it makes no difference. But the only thing that will propel something meaningful is an intense love. And if you can stir that in some way, and stir that for the basics of music, for counterpoint, for harmony, for 3 simple notes, and making them meditate on what music is about, because music is very simple in the end. It's really about basic harmonies and prolonging them through space. And if people can learn to love that and realize what the special gift that music is, what a gift this is given to us, then they can make something and they can say something of their own.
Mr. Serking was a head of a school of music, the Curtis, a very prestigious school.
Right.
Mr. Perahia is not.
No, that's right. I find I don't really have the time to devote to a list of students. I can't really be there for them. Maybe eventually I will, but at this point now I have so many things on my plate.
If you were, what would be the program? What would you make the students today learn and know?
What I think is important, it's going to sound very academic, is theory and harmony and counterpoint, because this is the basis of music. Jazz musicians will tell you, oh, the C9th chord goes to the F13 or something. That's the way classical musicians used to be. Figured bass was the way they talked. Bach would talk about 6/4 resolving to a 5/3, 4/2 chord going to a 6. This is not mathematics. This is music and this is chords, the way jazz musicians speak today. But classical musicians, if they speak about music at all, this is not what they talk about. They've lost touch with the basic elements of composition. And that's what I would, as a teacher, want them to know. What are the basis of music? And not to make it a technical thing. It's an enriching thing. It's like life. It doesn't need to be an academic subject.
In your master classes in the Jerusalem Music Center, you reinforce the Schenker method of analysis.
Schenker was a great and underrated Jewish thinker. He came from an Orthodox family.
Another Jewish
thinker. I think did to music what Freud and what Einstein did to their respective fields. Tried to reduce it. He reduces whole pieces to something like 3 chords and shows how they are prolongations of these chords. Now that might seem like an academic device, but unless you have simplicities, unless you have, let's say, E equals MC squared, unless you have simplicities, you can't build into abstractions. So you have to have some simple basic strokes. For him, these ideas, they gave birth to how a symphony or a sonata is born through counterpoint to connect one basic chord to another basic chord. And I think, you know, he was one of the neglected, one of the great teachers of music. And there's an irony in this. Do you know who was his most famous pupil? Furtwängler.
Sure. Oh, yeah.
Furtwängler studied for 30 years. I asked Mrs. Furtwängler, who's still alive and something like 97, I asked her about 10 years ago, we had lunch together, and I said, how important is Schenker to your husband's musical life? She dropped the spoon and she says, he's the most important influence my husband ever knew. Furtwängler. And the irony was that the Nazis censored Schenker. You couldn't read it. You couldn't read it. And Furtwängler was following it.
I am sometimes aware of a situation and afraid of a situation of paralysis by analysis. When you play, it's inspiration, it's so much spirituality, but there are some young pianists who would think that once they made this analysis...
Yeah, that's a very grave danger. Music has to be fresh and spontaneous always. And something I think is a good idea is to forget everything you learned the minute that you're playing it. You just play it as if it was something new, as if you never saw it, never heard of it, never knew it before, because it's fresh, made on the spot, there.
So in the morning you are teaching the Schenker,
yes,
or in the afternoon, and then in the master class you tell them to forget what you taught them.
Not in the master class. I need them to think about it for a week. But when they're going to perform and play it for their friends, then they have to forget everything and make music new.
It's wonderful. So first, force them to learn it.
Yes.
It's not too easy.
No, it's not
They
too
have to
easy.
submit papers, everything.
Well, I'm not asking that much, but think about those things. Think about connections. Actually, what it makes you do is think about a line.
But I heard that you are very pedantic.
Well,
You are hard on them.
I'm a bit hard. I want them to know exactly, not sort of, but exactly which note is going to which note. Because you do have to think in terms of a line. You do even have to think of one harmony connecting to another one 2 pages later. So they have to think, and I want them to be specific. But as I say, when they play it, and they play it for friends, this is not what you're thinking of.
Well, we have prepared another DVD for you.
Oh dear. So now, that way you've seen a linear progression through the whole thing with the harmony changes. So play me, play me the theme and then we'll stop.
And my last question to you, Marie, what's your opinion about television and classical music?
I'm all for it, because the more audience you can have for classical music, the better it is for everybody. It enriches people's lives. It touches them in a way, I think, well, I've experienced it myself. I wouldn't be anywhere without music, and not for a profession, but for my life. It means so much to me. I have to listen to music every day. But I think people will be very grateful to have opened the doors of classical music. And so I'm all for publicizing it, letting it known, not for an ego trip. It's not important for me, myself. It's important that people hear music and appreciate the classical music. It's a very rich heritage.
You have done a lot for television.
I have inadvertently, actually, in that many concerts of mine were taped on television. Even recently, I did a Schumann concerto, which was taped live to Japan, and I can tell you that was a nerve-wracking experience, but yeah, it went well.
Master classes as well, and interviews?
Yes, master classes I'm a little bit hesitant about. I mean, the Jerusalem Music Center will tape its own classes, but I'm a little bit hesitant about because I don't want the students to feel nervous or to feel put upon or to feel in some way uncomfortable. So it's very important the students' state of mind. But yes, I think the more introduction people can have, and things that you do are wonderful, for everybody tells me, they're wonderful to convey the beauty of classical music.
You know, the master class with audience and with cameras, for the students, that could be a nightmare.
It could be a nightmare,
because
exactly.
The maestro is aware of the cameras,
yes.
is aware of the audience,
That's right.
and he tries to please everybody.
That's right.
And you want to focus on the students.
That's right. Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. And it should never be an ego trip for the conductor, for the person that's doing the class, for the maestro, because that's not what it's about. It's about the students and them growing and them learning. So that's why I'm hesitant to put television crews into a master class.
Maria, I'm afraid that we have to finish, but if you promise us to come again, we might proceed and ask you more and more questions, because it was everything illuminating.
It's a great pleasure. Thank you, Arie, and thanks for all that you do.
תודה רבה, Maria. תודה רבה.
Thank you.